Hey guys, this is Mike.
And Joe.
And Dylan.
And Dylan! Hey, that's a guy that we haven't seen before on this channel.
Well, you've seen me before.
Yeah,
there we go.
But not on these. But anyway, we're back again. Another video, sort of more of a podcast thing than like a big old whatever we did last time. And this is kind of, a case of this is what happens when you've been isolated to your home for 2 days because of a virus. And,
you make podcasts.
You make podcasts. Listen, Dylan and I decided on making this before the virus even took effect. So this has been a work in progress.
Yeah, Mike just has a really bad schedule, so it took him being isolated to make it possible. So
Yay!
Very fair.
Yep. So anyway, Dylan and I have been talking about this for a little bit. Just wanted to, as a lot of you, hopefully most of you know, but if any of you don't know, Dylan is the owner or co-owner of, what are you?
Owner
of
Gamers
Lair up in Canada, up in Barrie, Ontario.
Up north in Barrie, Ontario. Yep.
So he owns it's a physical shop. It's an online shop. He hosts game after game and sells card after card. Ex-ARG team member, so I've known him from way back, and we've shared spaces in Florida. We got drunk together in Japan. Dylan's a good guy. So
We only got drunk in Florida. We didn't get drunk in Japan. You left.
We got drunk-ish in Japan. We shared some Satori whiskey.
Ish. We got drunk-ish in Japan.
Yeah.
Not quite Mike Grant's normal levels, but
Oh, we got normal
to
levels
maintain
in
your
Florida.
blood level. So
So, either way, this is just, I love talking to Dylan. Dylan's the best, so we have to make sure that we get him on here and let him share a breath of knowledge with all of you.
impart some wisdom.
Impart some wisdom. There you go. And Joey's also here. Hi, Joey.
Yeah, Joey.
I'm here.
He's actually the star of the show. That's why he's in the middle. So
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. This is actually
I'm on the
an
right
interview that
side
we're-
for me.
it's the
Joey,
Joey
we didn't
show.
tell you, this is actually an interview that Dylan and I are doing for you. You're answering the Q&As.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm ready.
All right, cool. What color's my underwear?
Oh, God. Pink?
Yeah, well, God isn't a color. You fail.
Oh, rip.
No, it's God pink.
It's actually blue.
God pink.
I had to
That was
check.
actually gonna be my first guess, but I figured I'd go with the more ridiculous option.
Yeah, you probably would have been right if I was more ridiculous at this point, but I had to work today from home.
From home, so it affected nothing. But
Yeah. I'm the one that looks like I worked from home.
There you go. But anyway, so jumping right into it, we're kind of going to do this more of like a Q&A kind of thing to an extent. Obviously, if Dylan wants to ask us questions, he can too, but I'm sure most of the stuff we're going to be saying is going to be mostly directed at him.
To him.
Yeah, to him.
with him.
With us. And with you. So, God,
So,
this is professional, let me tell you.
so Mike, start us off with our first question.
All right. So the first question, since Dylan has the experience up in the Great True North, how has the Canadian Force Will scene been doing since the introduction of Alice Origin 1, Alice Origin 2? I know we've seen some older players come back into the game, especially like mostly we've seen US-based players coming back into the fray, but I definitely want to know how things have been looking, how things have been turning out from at least your experience up where you are.
Well, it's been a lot better, that's for sure. It wasn't really well received, the new Valhalla cluster, and a lot of people are going to point fingers, be like, oh, it's when the transition was happening and the company was changing and there weren't as many GPs, and I'm like, well, that's true, but most of the problems people had were with the actual set 1 and 2, which was entirely FoW co, so nothing to do with I Spy. And just the whole rune mechanic in general was really poorly received because most people didn't like the fact that the decks are playing the same cards and basically just, splashing a color to try and fill the void. So it's like, am I playing Hanzo machines? Am I playing machines with Loki? Am I playing machines with Arthur? It's like, well, these are all the same deck. I'm just swapping a ruler and having the same runes, basically, maybe switching one. So that wasn't really well received. But the new rulers have been a lot better received. They have a lot more class identity to them. And because of that, it seems like players are really like a lot more invested in actually playing the decks and trying to make them better and showing up and repping them. So there's been a lot of really good feedback for this, and it's definitely shown a lot.
Solid, yeah. Do you have any I don't know how often, how many people your locals gets, as in terms of just like, I'm not sure like tournament sizes, players playing, but what's been the overall consensus on what people are like experimenting with and playing with?
It's kind of all over the place. We're kind of got a rep for being the aggro locals because for one point, literally all of us are playing Melgis. It was hilarious. When Josh came down, I told him that, and he was like, "No, there's no way." And then he showed him like half the players are playing Melgis. Like, what the hell is happening here?
That sounds Vegas.
So yeah. Normally aggro isn't so prevalent, but a lot of the new players have really latched onto it. They're like, man, this is so me. It fits so well. It's so fast and straightforward. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. That is pretty much aggro in a nutshell. But lately I've been noticing they're diversifying a lot. I got a couple people on Faria, a couple people on Prisia, a couple people sticking in Melgis still and not changing that at all. So I'd say it's getting pretty diverse, although we're definitely leaning a lot on the aggro lately.
Makes sense. I mean, with the Prisia showing in the 3 slots of the top 8 in Vegas, I'm sure.
No idea how that happened.
I know, it's crazy how that
told
works. Yeah, that's another thing.
People will learn how to play Machina eventually.
Eventually.
That's not an easy deck to play.
It's not. It's taken me like a couple weeks for that, but you know.
Derek was doing a pretty good job.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I'm glad that Derek and Cal are both top 8, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Cal didn't have the underwater robots, and he had to play against Melgis, so.
Oops.
Underwater robot, better math, so good.
Better math, oh man.
It's so much. It's like it's literally a card that was already amazing. It's like, oh, I'm just better. It's like, okay.
That's pretty straightforward and pretty hot though. I guess kind of leading into that, I actually completely misplaced the fact that like not only are you, you know, somebody who knows a thing or two about like the scene up in Canada as well as like the finances coming out of that, but you're also one of our top 8 players from Vegas who got to experience the ground zero of AO2.
Who doesn't love the slaughter of the new set format?
Who doesn't?
Hopefully we get to do that in Minnesota again.
Hopefully. I'm definitely hoping that.
See how that goes.
Yeah.
We'll take cheap flights, but as long as they're not grounded.
Facts.
Or United.
Yeah. I guess in that case, good thing to ask about. What was your preparation going into like a completely unknown format in a sense? Like this was like the first weekend the set was like really available for players to actually try with it. Did you expect? Was the field what you expected, and did you find that your deck was well suited for it?
I expected the field to be roughly half Machina, half Prisia, and then sprinkle in maybe like one Melgis deck and like 2 or 3 perfect Lokis. And what I found was the meta was like half Melgis, 3 or 4 Prisia decks total for the whole tournament, of which 3 got top 8. There was like maybe 10 Machina players, and then almost everyone else was perfect Loki.
Yep.
So it's like,
right.
and then there I think were 2 Atom decks, or Atom, however you want to pronounce it, but there's
yeah.
2 of those. So it's like, all right, well, this is a very different kind of field than I was expecting. But all the testing pretty much worked out because the whole idea was it doesn't matter what they're playing as long as you have good matchups, and are actually prepared, it'll be good. So, and that pretty much held true. Although the Melgis were definitely not very well equipped to play CS, so that was pretty straightforward.
Nice. What were your matchups in the top cuts? I probably should have done some research on this, but again, we are very not prepared and also casual.
Well, it was pretty straightforward in Top Cut. All the surprises we're getting there. Top Cut was me versus Prisia, and the person with triple hot springs definitely won that one out. It wasn't me.
Fair enough.
And then Jalen had a surprise upset where he beat out Adam.
Yeah, I remember that. That was
which is a really, in my opinion, it's a really bad matchup. I didn't actually watch the stream, but I'm guessing Jalen pulled it out those first duels because man, he did it. And then Jalen lost to Machines of all things the next round, if I recall.
Yep.
That kind of sucked. And then Machines didn't beat Prisia, so that was over.
Yeah, I think I remember Brandon saying I don't think he opened with enough Kaguya's to win the matchup.
Which is how that deck completely operates.
That deck needs Kaguya's, and it's 90% of the deck. Cancel, slowly
Can we
push.
first get Gusting Skies?
2 to 3 Kaguya's, then you're probably not getting very far.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just, I guess, what it came down to.
Yeah. You said that you had surprises in the rounds. What were your biggest scare moments, I'd say, in rounds?
Biggest scare moments were seeing Adam in the pool at all, and around when I played against it, but it was a newer player, so she didn't have a fully completed deck. She had most of the threats, but she also had things like Acolyte of the Sun. And I'm like, okay, it's pretty easy for me to pick those off, and if I pick them off, she basically has to take another turn and set up again, so stuff like that was pretty nice. I definitely didn't expect to see any Melchus, and it's a really, really good matchup for Priscia, but it plays entirely different than all your other matchups, so I'm glad I playtested for that, because it was supposed to be like a rogue deck, and it was half the field.
Would you mind describing how that matchup goes? Because I don't think
so that matchup goes, Melgus flips, and he pressures you extremely quickly, which is not how all your other matchups go, because you're always the aggressor. But in Melgus, he's just so much faster than you that you are the defensive deck. You're like a control style, and that's why Prissy really shines, because she's a mid-range, not actually like an aggro, although you do play her pretty aggressively. So the idea being you just slowly build up a board of really big beasts, and you just make sure he's not hitting you in the face. Because even if you trade 1-for-1, you're better at making cards than Melgus is, and your cards are better than his. But he's a lot quicker, so you just got to make sure you're using your pings to get rid of his guys. You're making sure to buff your beasts so you can block and clear them. You want to pressure him into flipping as quickly as possible, because at that point, he's really behind. Like, almost all the matches were because I pressured them to flip in 2 to 3 turns, and then I had like a Regalia break to pop the Lave, so they're flipped ruler with no swiftness, and they just kind of got to pass. Or you hit them with, let's say, I think it was Burning Rush. You Burning Rush the Melchus and kill him. Okay, well, he's not swiftness into you because he's dead, so that's gone. Stuff like that. It's just pretty much just making sure you're set up so that when they are forced to flip, and they will do it, that you're prepared to actually go on this backswing. And it's not always as easy as you think, because Melchus goes really fast. But at the end of the day, he just doesn't have a lot of other options other than flipping if he doesn't get a good setup.
In terms of like best cards for the matchup, did you find like Zhuan Wu the turtle to be like one of the biggest things stopping him from like pushing you down?
It's obviously dependent on you opening the spring, but it's the ultimate shutdown card, because other than the things I mentioned where you force them to flip, the way you get there is with the turtle, because he's a free blocker that doesn't take damage, and he bounces either one of the free tokens from Melgus, so he doesn't do damage, or one of his 1-drops, and he's not going to want to cast those again because he doesn't really want to be that. Melgus' sweet spot is like 2-drops, so making them replay their 1-drops is a really big tempo swing. And then you get a free blocker out of it, who's also a beast. It's or a sacred beast, but it's the no-brainer. You just kind of want to do that.
And then you just kind of slow roll him into like the counters and everything. He gets big, and then you just got to pressure at that point.
Well, you don't even really need to slow roll. Once you've actually stopped them from killing you, you just kill them on the backswing usually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because you just have all these little guys that are suddenly much larger.
Yeah. Were you worried about the Regalia breaks coming out of Melgus? Because usually they run a couple in the first place.
Yes, but not as much as you'd think, because again, the whole point of the matchup is just that you need to live for a couple turns. So as good as Regalia Break is, they can't really use it and also push. A lot of the time when they have it, it's because they either didn't have a turn 1 play, or they just didn't get the right colors. So in that circumstance, if they just pass turn 1 and have mana open, then you need to like, maybe I shouldn't coin out this Regalia and have them blow it up immediately, so I'm really far behind. But every time you play it, you get enough value that as long as your guys are there next turn, you can just play another copy and be fine.
Fair.
Good stuff.
Against Melgus, yeah. Again, none of the other matchups play that way. It's you being the aggressor, but Melgus specifically, yeah.
You didn't face Victor's Valentina deck during that day, did you?
No, I didn't even know the player who did it. I just knew there was one Valentina deck in the tournament, and I couldn't see them anywhere, so I don't think it did super well. But
yeah, I saw Victor on stream. Unfortunately, I saw there were a couple of misplays here and there. The deck is probably not one of the best things to bring on the first weekend where the set was legal.
Yeah, I definitely was looking at Valentina, and I said she could be a pretty good control, but I don't really want to bring a control deck in the first week of a new format, because that's just asking for a lot of specific matchups that you don't know what you're going to see. So
it's such an uphill battle.
Pretty impressed to see. I think he had the Gorgon Turbo package in his deck, right?
I think so. He was doing
because people were talking.
He was doing a lot of like the zero attack manipulation stuff. Like he had the Forbidden Lab and stuff.
Yeah, it was a bunch of interesting stuff, but I don't see that doing well on like a first day.
Yeah.
especially with all those Aggro decks. Jeez.
You just really need to optimize a control deck to get through a tournament like that.
I think, unfortunately, if you're trying to run like specifically that version of the deck, if you're facing a field of 10 Melgus, you're gonna get high rolled at one point during the day. And
it just comes down to the fact that in control matchups, you need to know what you're playing against, and in a new format, you just don't have that flexibility. Unless you're Kagi, just cancel everything, but,
That's not even a control deck at that point, though. That's literally just like,
just cancel,
throw things at people and hope they die.
So, like, I was kind of surprised because everyone was talking about that Valentina Turbo. I was like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. But not only did I not see it, it obviously didn't do well, so.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Victor Harris was close.
Yeah.
But again, doesn't matter if you're not in it.
Yep. Close is definitely good, but it's like you need something super specific to get through there. I think that if he had maybe like another week or two to like really figure out the deck, I think he would have done better, and I think we could have probably seen some more Vals in the field. But
probably.
I think that
there's a couple things that I think could really swing, like Chrisia matchups and stuff like that. But you need to really know that you're going to see like X amount of Percival that you can prepare, or X amount of Melges. But if you don't have any idea, it's really hard to say, oh, I need to prepare against 10 decks. It's just not something Control can really accurately do.
Exactly, yeah.
So there was a bunch of people that had like pretty much a straight certainty that Machina was the best deck in the format, and it was somewhat underrepresented in the field and then didn't perform as well as it should have based on how many were actually present there. What are your thoughts on Machina, and what do you think happened at the tournament that made them not show as well?
I don't think it was underrepresented, because if I recall, he was the other than Melgus, he was the most represented. But at the same time, I think a lot of people were playing less optimal builds because they didn't have time or the cards to optimize. So even stuff like Cal and Derek were playing almost identical decks, but Derek had the underwater robots and Cal didn't, and that became a really big deal when you're playing against Melgus because he can tap his ruler down. Right. And if they flip and they get the tap down, they just lose, so they can't flip. And that in a matchup like that is really, really important. But it also means that you have things like you can do your infinite combo and make sure there's no blockers and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the deck kind of struggles a bit if they can't get a flyer on the field or like a Vivian to tap things down. And if you interrupt the setup of the combo, it usually takes a couple turns to get it set up again, because it's a really easy combo. But as soon as they break a piece of it, it actually takes like 2 or 3 turns to pick pieces up and rearrange them again. And I noticed that watching Derek's matchup a lot. He was playing against Jalen, and there was a lot of times where he had pieces of the combo, but he couldn't do the whole combo, which meant he had to take another turn, and that meant Jalen had another turn, and it just became this really big grind game, which I think if you play Machina right, he can easily be a swarm deck that goes into really good late game. But you just kind of have to make sure you build around those kind of things, and I don't think most of the decks did.
Fair.
Not that much of the one late game, but...
So, in short, there's a little tiny optimizations that can be done to the Machina deck that really make it shine in all matchups, but you have to have all those tools available. And it's just finding a way to get into that transition away from combo into your late game to seal deals against certain decks, especially the mid-range ones. Right.
Yep, I think a lot of people just focus too much on the combo, and although it's really good, it's just not. The deck has so much potential beyond it that people kind of ignored.
Yep.
Agreed. Okay.
What were your thoughts on how many Machina did you end up playing against, and how often did you find yourself kind of struggling to take down Maribel, who I assume, and from my experience, has been like one of the linchpins of that deck for the most part?
Well, believe it or not, I didn't play any Machina the entire tournament.
Which there you go,
what I was prepared to play against. I was very prepared to play against it. I thought it would be the big deck, and then just didn't see it, not a single time. I was very ready for it, and it just didn't come. So, but I, from watching Jalen and other matchups, it's a really straightforward matchup, just like I thought it would be. You need to just make sure that they don't have a vessel for counters like a Gwen or a Vivian, and just build the board and steamroll them, because their guys can't get nearly as big as your guys can. And without Lancelot, which no one was running Lancelot, there's just no way to board clear his machine.
Makes sense.
Yep, that is how I feel about that matchup as well.
Lancelot's a very scary card, but in a format where no one runs him, you have nothing to worry about.
Definitely makes sense to me.
I think that basically sums up all of Vegas.
Yeah, just no Lancelots, no one prepared for what was there, just no way to do anything.
I still don't think Machina plays Lancelot.
You could easily side him in certain matchups, I think, and
Yeah.
it might be a bit slow, but I think that having a board clear option is even as a one of is pretty relevant,
Hmm.
especially because you can search machines.
Just play Secret Dance of the Moonlight.
Great card at instant speed, right? I honestly, I think both of the other Pressy players we taught played it, and I just couldn't understand because the card isn't quick cast and involves life, which even without hindsight of the format being super aggro based is something you don't really have a whole lot of in most. Because even if you're playing against a big control deck, all it takes is one really big swing to kind of make that irrelevant.
And all you have to kind of counteract is Baihu, but Baihu's life gain is
And it's-
minimal at best.
Also 2 mana because you got to pay 1 for the red and 1 for the awakening.
Yep.
So you're paying life and you're splitting it amongst the target, and that's my other problem. It's like, okay, I paid 2,000 life, I do 2,000. It's like, well, now I'm doing like 800 this guy, 500 to this guy, 500 to this guy, 200 to this guy. It's like, well, that's not super efficient. If you had Moon, it would be better, but my problem with that is it's a double-sided final battle, so you actually end your own turn essentially, and that card is too lopsided in my opinion for it to see like reasonable play in anything besides a very specific control deck.
Definitely agree with that.
Water.
Yeah, probably, but like in New Frontiers, I didn't understand why they had it in there, and I'm not really sure how well it did for them, but they both had it as a 1 or 2 of, so.
If I had to guess, I would say just, when you had Final Battle in your deck, it just, whenever you wind up drawing it, it just felt like you had such an advantage over your opponent because you could just say, okay, the board is now doing this.
Yep, one-sided final battle great, two-sided final battle not so great.
It's just the fact that you could actually influence a whole board for a turn.
Oh
Is
yeah,
just
J-Ruler
something
as
powerful
well.
you could do.
And,
yeah.
it's a cloud effect, so even if they flash something in, it's like, okay, it's still gone, so.
Hmm. Next question, Mike.
Hang on. Lost my train of thought.
Ito is very prepared.
I was getting really into that one. Damn. Yeah. How many Super Beast Spring Rush were you running in your deck? I forget.
4 copies.
4 copies.
I think all of us ran 4.
Yeah, that's something that.
And everyone was like, "Oh, it's so cloggy." I'm like, "Well, you always mulligan it away." And
We're back.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you get what he said or no?
Run it by again, just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just run the question through again. Yeah.
Yeah. The how many Super Beast Burning Rush? And...
Oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, we all ran 4. Yeah, it was one of those things where you mulligan it away in your opening hand, but anytime you see it after, like, okay, this is how it went. This is the win condition. 9 times out of 10, if you cast Super Beast Burning Rush, it's a win. The times it doesn't, it usually sets you up to do your other plays anyway, and just kind of puts you in a better spot than you started with, because the only time you don't want Super Beast Burning Rush is if you get all strangers, but you have no control over that because it's at random. So even if I get like 5 strangers and 2 swiftness tokens, well, the tokens are 6/6 plus whatever buffs in their swiftness, so that could potentially be like 2,000 points of damage just from triggering the token effect twice, or doing 2 face burn damage in 1 token, or you're standing your mana, and it's like, okay, and I have 2 more mana to play 2 more cards, and those can be going face, and then also having the burn damage in a token, or having a stranger like Regulus or something come out, and like, okay, now I've got a Regulus, he's a beast, he gets a buff, or I've got a Barris, now all my guys are pierced and attack. Like, there's just so many combinations that card can give you, and almost all of them are good, even the strangers, as long as you don't get a lot of copies of the stranger or the standing stones.
Yeah. Speaking
When
of
you've got like
strangers,
6 stone stands, not great.
Actually, before you move on to strangers, was there any worry about the card not functioning? Like a judge rules that Super Beast Burning Rush doesn't work because how does he? No, you asked first.
I did, but also the card can't function unless it's like without those parentheses, because the way that the targeting modes work is everything's selected on resolution. So if it didn't let you choose multiple modes, then it wouldn't be random, and the awakening would never need to be done. It would just be like, as soon as I get 4 counters, I cast it and I get 1 of each, and that would be really good. But so it was either good card either way, just because I know that it can't function the other way. It wasn't really a concern going in.
Gotcha.
So, speaking of strangers,
Right? Yep.
I was trying to remember, a lot of the list of the stranger list that a lot of people were playing. Were you one of the ones playing Liz or not playing Liz?
Liz, the 2 cost to cancel the spell?
Cancel spell.
Yeah.
Yes, I think everyone played her.
Yeah, I think most people did. I think there was one I want to say it was Cal who didn't play her.
Cal was on
Machina.
Machina. Yeah.
Yeah.
But most of them played Liz too, I think,
Yeah.
because canceling spell is really good.
Cancel spells are really good, especially when that spell could be Super Beast Burning Rush.
Yeah, that in the mirror, that's actually what it comes down to a lot of the time. Is if your random stranger that you picked is Liz and you have the mana to cast her, then she can stop a Super Beast Burning Rush. But doesn't come up in practice very often because 2 is actually a lot in that matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
She's still a good card though.
For sure. Especially once you have your springs online, you're kind of like cheating out mana at that point anyway, and you also have the claw to produce the 2 mana for it. So there's potential there to do that, but I know exactly what you mean with the just in case, like in the event that you happen to find her.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel about don't cheat in the current format?
In the current format, I think it's not great. But going in the event, I wasn't sure if we'd see like a Field of Perfect Loki or not. So I think don't cheat is really, really important to have in your sideboard. And against certain decks, it's really important to have in your main board. But the vast majority of the decks right now, anyway, from what I feel, are going to have Regalia. And because of that, you would rather have Regalia Break versus don't cheat. But I think they're both really good cards. They just have a time and a place.
Very fair.
Makes sense.
The card draw of don't cheat's really good too. People always forget about that. I always forget about that, but it's there and it's really helpful.
Oh, that's what makes it good.
Y'all remember Absolute Cake Zone? This is her now. Feel old yet?
It's Cake Zone that you actually draw the card off of. Crazy, I know.
It's wild. Joey, did you have any other questions about Vegas?
No, I think we're done with Vegas.
Yeah. I think
Kind of
we've-
exhausted it.
I think we've
Just
exhausted
kind of
it.
wanted
Unless you want to
quickly brush over the strangers, just because I know there's a lot of people who weren't really sure about the strangers. The only reason I did the strangers I did was because Liz and the other 2-drop have quick cast.
Oh,
So if you, Yagnispe, yeah. So when you pick either of them from your stranger, because in the mirror match you don't want to pick tokens because Turtle gets rid of them for free. So you go for strangers, and that, in my opinion, anyway. And when you do that, and you get either of those to the quick cast, so either you respond to them by either double blocking or double attacking, or at the end of the turn you just cast it as a free beast stick.
Not bad.
Otherwise, it just comes down to Regulus is the beast. He's fast, does damage when blocked or hits the face, and Barrist is just ridiculously good. That's pretty much what it just came down to there.
What modes
Makes
did you
sense.
choose? What moves?
And
what modes did you choose most of the time for Varist?
always swiftness,
Perfect.
but sometimes Pierce as well.
Makes sense.
If you can't cast him with swiftness, you just wait a turn. He's always there for that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think that covers Vegas for the most part. At least my questions about it.
I think so.
So moving on to your role as a shop owner, and especially as an online shop owner, I definitely would like to hear a little more about any recent trends that have either struck you by surprise in the Force Wolf community as far as selling cards goes, any cards that you've seen kind of like jumping up in price, like any like small, like weird little niches and surprises that you've seen, just from.
I'm really surprised certain cards don't see popularity until they're almost gone. For example, Shakti is a really big one. No one really seemed to understand the power of Shakti until almost all of like TCG Player and sites like that were sold out entirely. That everyone's like, oh shoot, I need Shakti, and she's an SR, and no one's got a Shakti, and I need 4 copies of Shakti. And I'm like, well, it's pretty obvious, right? It's basic support for Sword Arts, and we figured since 2 of the 3 rulers use Sword Arts, it would probably be something relevant, right? But it's something the general populace didn't really clue into until later on. On the other side, there's stuff that I don't really think has any real popularity that really surprises me. Old Dark Alice cards are a really big one because people love Dark Alice, so it doesn't matter if the card's Twilight Wanderer and totally unplayable. If it's a stamped full art Dark Alice, people like it. And on that note, a lot of the Memoria cards, which everyone's like, this is garbage, it's useless, no one buys these. Like, well, no, actually, a lot of people do buy the Memoria cards. They're actually really popular. So that there's actually a lot of Wanderer players, believe it or not. It just they're not in the same areas as everyone else. So, for example, a lot of the Wanderer players are over in Europe. but not in places you'd think. Like they'll be in like France or like Scandinavia or like countries like that. So like the smaller pockets, Wander is actually really popular right there. So there's not a lot of stores that actually sell them. Scandinavia, Finland, that kind of stuff. It's all like that's where a lot of Wander is popular.
France didn't really surprise me as much just because I was on the ban list committee with like Anthony Laroc, I think is his last name. Oh man, I forget his last name. No,
Yeah,
We're sticking with it.
I wish my phone would work.
Well,
Anthony Laroc, yeah. So I know that he's one of the biggest purveyors of Wander in that area, and he's the one that was trying to make the biggest ban list changes and trying to spearhead that movement. So it makes sense that they'd be buying up a lot.
yeah, I was just honestly surprised with how strong Wander goes in those countries because it doesn't exist very much in Canada or over in the US, so I was pretty surprised. Well, even like the countries like Italy, they don't see nearly, at least not for me anyway, because I ship internationally, I don't see anywhere near as many orders from them as I do from like Finland and France and those kind of countries because they really like the Wanderer supply. No one really sells it, right? So other than that, it's just the fact that there definitely seems to be a really large lag between when people buy boxes and people buy single cards. People seem a lot more likely to buy the single cards even if they're more expensive than buying the boxes to get what they need. And then later on, like for example, Decisive Battle of Valhalla is a really good example because the prices were super inflated to the point where like it didn't matter what you got in your box, you almost always got double your value just by opening the box.
Yeah.
And it took a really long time for people to kind of put the two and two together. They were definitely more willing to pay $40 for a Dark Alice than they were to open a box and try and get a Dark Alice. And I get that the box doesn't always give you Dark Alice, but when the order is like 2 Perfect Loki, 2 Dark Alice, 2 Chimimi, 4 Bastet, it's like, okay, well, if you would have opened even one box, you would have got half of these cards, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it took a really long time for people to clue into that, but by then most of the boxes were gone anyway.
Yep, makes sense.
would you say so? There's been a prevailing doomsaying that's been going on in the Force of Will community for a really long time. Has any of your selling been signs that maybe there's new life in the game because of the Alice cluster?
No, everything after Bahamut died, there hasn't been a game since then. In seriousness, no, there's been a really big uptick since New Valhalla, because I think New Valhalla was probably the lowest point in the game, because not only were all of the tournaments canceled, but people just really did not like the mechanics. So even people who like Force of Will were like, well, I want to get back in, but not only can I not buy starter decks, these don't really seem like that fun, they don't seem original, there doesn't really seem to be a lot going on. Whereas as soon as the first set happened in Melgis and Faria, people were like, oh, this looks pretty cool, I'll pick this up, and just immediately jumping in. Not something that happened with New Valhalla. It took a lot of convincing people to pick up the decks even when they were shorthanded. Just people seeing like, oh, they're bringing back Chrissy, I'll get that. Valentina, hell yeah, sign me up. Like this Mr. Rance over here. So people just love seeing the old characters. They love the old art style. They love even the reprints. A lot of players like, man, they brought back Thunder. That's crazy. Like stuff like that just really gets a lot of the old players back, but also a lot of new players who wanted to jump in but didn't really have a good chance the first time.
Remind me that they didn't bring back Lightning Strike because then they would have to print Aaron's face again.
Yeah, can't have that. It's just crazy.
I thought they did reprint as a memorial, but they didn't use the other art.
No,
They did it as a memorial,
They
so
art.
that yeah, they didn't use Aaron's art because they didn't want Voldemort cursing everyone. So.
But they gave us Quinn's art for
Yeah, you know, you just need a good face smashing, turn you into bear.
Oh no.
I'm gonna turn you to bear and then body slam you, but
With a bow.
True combo. Bear
We
body.
get a body slam promo of the bow. We'll have Artemis bow, but it's just him body slamming someone like.
yeah. Body slam has to do at least 400, right?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
ask Alex.
Maybe exactly 400.
Exactly 400. So Alex is like what, an 8-4?
Yeah, give or take.
He's
Yeah.
actually a 4/4 bear.
Oh, he's a 4-4 bear. That's true. I don't think in any context you'd ever hear Alex Blanding referred to as a bear, but
Very true.
Maybe personality-wise, I guess. I don't know.
Oh man, it's a good thing he doesn't follow Force of Will, otherwise he'd be mad about this. But
Oh no.
He'll probably hear
did
about
I
it
say
somehow.
that? Yeah, actually, I definitely want to kind of pick your brain a little bit more about Decisive Battle of New Valhalla as well, just because the set is such like a hot topic right now. Like, people complain a lot about, you know, not only availability, and power level, but also just like you can't find the boxes, the cards just Like, how much do most of those cards inflate after the set had initially dropped?
A lot. Initially, most of those cards were like $10, $20. They weren't anything crazy. But the problem being, no one bought any boxes. So I'm just like, okay, I'll just crack open more. Like, it's not a problem if the cards are actually worth something, right? So it's cracked open. I want to say I did like 4 cases, which is a lot more than I normally do. Like, I normally do like 1 case and then 2 trade-ins and stuff. But yeah, no, I'm just like, whatever. Like, they're there. I can still get them. None of the other stores are buying them. Sure, I'll just keep cracking cases. And then things like the Dark Atlas and the Athenias. And I'm like, okay, a lot of these cards are like really, really good. And so they're just like flying off the shelves. I'm like, okay, well, there's no more. So they're gone now. And then everyone's like, all right, but I would like to purchase them now. And I was like, all right, well, I got this one like Perfect Loki for $30. And it's like, no, I'm waiting for the reprint. And I'm like, I don't think that's happening per se, because it's been like 5 months. It's like, nah. Had this guy in Italy stone cold convinced that there was a reprint, because the distributor at one point said they were trying for a reprint. So he refused to buy any of those cards at $30, and they're just gone now. So I'm like, I'm not gonna lower the price or anything, because I know that everyone wants them,
I guess, but it's still like not gonna be exactly what people are expecting, especially if there's like no attendance because of the fucking coronavirus.
Well, if there's like a reprint, if there was a reprint even back then, there's no saying it's gonna be big. Like, I remember something happened with Yu-Gi-Oh! There was a set that was like a side set, kind of in the same respect, where like, I'm not gonna buy it, it's a side set, it's whatever. And it had really, really important cards, and they did a reprint, and it was like a case per store. Like, it's not a meaningful reprint, right? Because people don't really think about the fact that when they do these printing runs, they need to do like hundreds of thousands of boxes in order to make them like sustainable. So if I can't say I'm going to sell 100,000 boxes at Decisive Battle of Valhalla, well, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm either going to do a really small run, like a couple hundred cases, or I'm just going to say, hey, I'm not reprinting this. It's just not financially feasible to do so, right? And that's the thing. As much as that set was popular, Forcible isn't quite what it used to be back in Alice Cluster, so they can't afford to do 3rd, 2nd, 4th printings, any of that kind of stuff. It's pretty much what they order is what they get, and they can't really do other print runs. So that's kind of what I predicted, because initially everyone was like, there are reprints in this set, I will not buy any. And I'm like, well, you should probably buy some. There's still some pretty good cards in there. They're like, nah, I'm not doing it. Gonna cancel my order on all my TCG player pre-orders and all these other stuff. I'm like, sure, whatever, like, do what you want to do, but don't think you should throw away the baby with the bathwaters because there's some reprints in the set. And well, it turns out I was correct. So
it's like, oops, sorry, the set's meta-defining.
Well, I was actually going to ask specifically about that, because the with half the set being reprints, it gave a lot of people that like feeling of, oh, is this going to be the next MOA where there's a bunch of garbage in the set and then there's like 5 good cards?
The whole mindset just kind of blows me away, because the mindset of players is a lot different than me as a business person or like a pro player, right? So both as a professional player, pro, yeah. Someone who enjoys playing competitively very often, let's say that's easier. Okay, there we go. So as a pro player, I see commons are almost always garbage. They're never like good cards. They're usually like Timmy cards, like, oh, I'm gonna make my Silent Mermaid work. When it's raining, you can't play spells on your turn. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool, but that's not like that was a rare actually, but you get the idea. All the cards are like that, like, hey, I've got a gimmick, and if I'm really good at it, this card is playable. So like, commons are never good. In the very rare case they are good, it's like a one-off in like the whole cluster kind of deal.
It's like a whole pig kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Like, so when the commons are good, sure, but almost never are they ever any good, and they're always chaff that you throw away, because you only need 4 copies and you get 100 of them and you throw them away. But as soon as you say the cards are cards they already have, they go, whoa, you're saying I'm throwing the cards away because I already have them? And you're like,
I don't even get 4 copies of them?
I don't get to get 4 copies of this common in my booster box and throw away 6 because I still have 4 extra? Like, this is still back when we had 36 card packs, or 36 pack boxes, right? So 1 box will get you way more than a playset of a common, right? So 1 box, you're already throwing away cards. So saying that you're going to replace some of the commons with reprints is like, sure, but that doesn't change the value of the box. The value of the box is always rares, full arts, and super rares, right? And I actually really liked a lot of the reprints, for example, like the Tiger and stuff, as a full art versus a stamp, because say what you will, some people prefer full art. some people prefer stamps. But having the option with a new printed card with new text, the attack and defense in the proper spots, and having that in a proper full art was really nice for me. I actually like that a lot. Whereas if they didn't do that, you wouldn't have had that option, right? Same thing with the Valhalla stuff. You couldn't get Donut Drone as a full art foil without actually having him in the set. Stuff like that. So even though the commons are reprints, there's still like new printings in better foilings or better full arts or different artwork, all that kind of stuff. That if they were just a chaff common, you wouldn't have cared.
Yep, I could agree with that too, because like, if you get the star decks, you only get one of each rune, and say you want to play, say, for example, I like building Epic Stories decks because I'm a giant masochist, and I enjoy taking a bunch of one-ups and smashing them together. But I was making a deck where it was like, it was using like Shamimi and a Darkness ruler, and then a Lucifer and another ruler, and both of them wanted Tears of the Fallen. And it's like, I only got one of those, except I'm like, oh wait, let me go to my DBV box.
Yeah. That was a really big thing for me too. Like having demon divisions and stuff. Like, man, full art demon division. Plus, I don't need my one starter deck to play all these decks. I just throw demon division in my wander deck, throw it in my Epic Stories deck, and then I still got my one in my competitive green black deck, so I'm ready to go, right?
Yep.
But people just don't see like that. Like, honestly, there's a really big gap between like actual value and perceived value. So like, Decisive Battle of Valhalla was very decisive about that, because the actual value of the set was like hundreds of dollars often. Like, it's just really high value. Talking in Canadian rupees here. Whereas in like other sets, like let's say Strangers to New Valhalla, it's like, okay, this set has lots of value, like you've got Estemas and stuff, but none of these cards are worth more than $10, except maybe like a full art Estema. So like you would probably get like $70 out of like $140 box, like taxes and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, that's cool, but that's not like actual value. You'll feel like you got some cool stuff, and your mind says like, man, this is great. But if you were to go and sell that, you wouldn't get anything. Decisive Battle's the actual opposite. It's like, wow, I got all these commons. I've seen these before. This value is so low. Whereas the cards are selling for like $200 when you total them up. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's just how people think, right?
Yep, exactly.
Perceived value versus actual value.
Same similar thing as you mentioned before. You mentioned that like memorial cards actually sell, which is nuts to think about, but like, at the same time, it's like a lot of these people haven't gotten these cards in these rarities. Some people were complaining that they couldn't find Arondites because they can't find
that was really smart. Like, I like how Lorite was reprinted and Arendite was reprinted and Rachel was reprinted, and these are all cards people are like, man, I cannot get my hands on these cards because they're Time Spinning Witch, or they're like super meta staple cards, or I think Keys and Spinning Aquacell were also ones. I actually, believe it or not, I think I had like 70 copies of Spinning Aquacell, and around like last month I ran out. Someone bought them for Wander, and I'm like, wow, that's my last 4 copies of Spinning Aquacell. Like, that's actually crazy. But then it's in the Memoria set now, so like there's a lot of extra value that people don't really think about for this kind of stuff. And obviously it's good for draft because you have some power cards there.
Yeah, I was running out of Final Battles actually, and those got
man, that Final Battle art is sick. Like,
exactly.
And I actually like a lot of them. Like, for example, I like the green borders and the green cards because they look really nice, actually. Even though the card isn't full art, I'm like, this is really sick to have the green border on the green card, right?
I think some of the biggest problems are just with like the way the text boxes sit, but it's like, it's more so function over form at that point. Like, what can you do when it comes down to that?
I mean, they've done some pretty crazy stuff, like when they did the full art Rachel, like the actual full art Rachel, like
the tiny text box.
Yeah, I showed up at a GP once, and I think it was Alex Bland, and he was like, "What the hell are those?" I'm like, "I showed you these before." He's like, "Yeah, but I didn't think you had them, like, actually."
Honestly, I just think those things are a myth.
Man, those Rachels are great. I love them so much. It's like, well, the text is so minuscule on Rachel anyway. Everyone knows what Rachel does. If they really want to see it, they can squint their eyes, sure. But having the text being like super, super small and out of the way just means you can appreciate the full art, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Saying that the title isn't important because that doesn't need to be super blown up. That can be small. The will cost is a picture. It doesn't really matter, right? It's a very simplified picture. So I actually really like that, and I hope they do that with more cards. So just not ones that have huge blocks of text, because that would be painful.
Sizing tool broken. Understandable. Have a nice day.
Hey guys, we did this with art style with Satan. Enjoy.
Yeah. But if they did it with like Final Battle, I think people would be pretty happy. For example.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
I'll take Valentina like that too.
you'll take Valentina anyway.
Take the Valentina ruler like that, so you have to have all her texting like this.
There you go, perfect. So what does she do when you put
She's got 3 effects, but I can't read any of them, so I'm gonna say she does them all 3 times.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen complaints that this is about Valhalla's like commons and such, that all because there are new cards, they were actually like pretty garbage compared to the rest of the set. Like Mike and I were discussing a video, and I was going through the cards, and I'm like, wow, I never realized how bad new Valhalla cards are compared to like everything else.
Like, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, because if you played in Grim Cluster, there were some really freaking bad commons in there. Cards that don't even make sense to this day, like Wicked Witch of the West, Bird Catcher. I'm like, what do these cards do? It's like, you can add a bird to your hand. It's like, are they going to make more birds? Like, no, they did not make more birds.
There's one bird.
Like one bird in the last set. And it's like, what about Wicked Witch of the West? Like, oh, she's got 1-drop stats on a 2-drop, but don't worry, we gave her a downside as well. And it's like, yeah, why wouldn't she have a downside for being understated, right?
It's important.
So like, and back then it was your foils were always rare or SRs. You didn't get full arts as well. So like, it definitely is a grain of salt. Like, you come a long way from pulling a pack and be like, wow, I got a Cinderella and Wicked Witch of the West. This is a great pack. Now you can be like, man, I got the Shakti and a Shakti. Wow.
Yeah. That's
a good pack.
Full art.
Right? Like, that's the thing you can get. Like, even though some of the commons might be poop, you just got to kind of take things with a grain of salt.
Well, I'm not even talking about the commons. I even think the super rares from New Valhalla Cluster was pretty bad, which kind of led to
some of them could be. Like, honestly, it was a lot more mixed, which is not bad, but people like think it's really bad. For example, Tiger Me is bad. She's a rare, but she's not horrible. She's still playable. It's more of a Timmy kind of card, but it is actually decent. Whereas like Eagle Me is amazing. It's actually 4 of an any Mimi deck, hands down, and it actually sees play, or I'm not sure about now, but it did see play in green decks that even weren't Mimi, because it's actually a really solid buff on a 1-drop with good stats, right?
Yep.
So it's one of those things, like, that was an uncommon, and they sprinkled that around a lot more in New Valhalla Cluster. But I just think that the player perception is that SRs should all be good, and rares and stuff should decently be good, and the commons and uncommons should be bad. So even though they complain when all the uncommons and commons are reprints, like, oh, these are garbage, they actually expect them to be garbage. It's just this weird mental like hierarchy they have going on. But generally, players expect commons and uncommons to be bad for the most part, and they expect rares and SRs to be good for the most part. And when you play with those expectations, they get salty. Like, really salty.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up on the hour marker here. I think this is probably a good spot to cut this.
All right.
Unless if anybody else has, Joey, if you have any questions, Dylan, if you have questions for us too, if you want to try and flip this on us.
Well, questions for you. Yeah. Why don't you call your podcast the Joey Showy?
Because I would die inside.
I think that's a good reason for a spinoff. Then I think we should do that.
All right, we'll work on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can just have drunk nights with Mike, because every night's a drunk night for him.
I mean, that could be a recurring concept, you know, just drunk nights with Mike, also starring Joey.
I like it.
No questions from me, really.
Okay.
Cool.
Very nice.
If we've got nothing left, I guess this is a good chance to stop this. Hope you all enjoyed this. I definitely would like to do some of these more often, because this was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. Just kind of like completely unscripted, casual kind of comments.
You have no excuse though, because you had like 4 weeks to determine the script for this, and you're just like, yeah, I'm just not going to do that.
And I was informed of this 5 minutes ago, so I had no time to prep at all.
You did a good job, all things considered.
Yeah.
We try our best. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. This was fun.
Hey, anytime this was fun, you guys want to have me on again, just let me know.
We'll do. Please
Awesome.
And thank you. All right. Well, in the meantime, this has been Mike.
And Joe.
And Dylan.
Deepwood and also Gamesware. Signing off. Peace out, guys.
Bye-bye.